Hey, I'm Matt. Welcome to my podcast, The Imagining, a time to explore the imagination, creativity, and mental health. All of the conversations I'm having form part of the research for my new book. I hope that you have the opportunity during this time to discover something new about yourself. Tom?
Hello.
Hello, we're related.
We are.
How's that feel?
What a privilege, you know, to be related legally to Matt Cooper.
Legally related.
Yeah, legally tied.
Gosh, I've just given you your first nephew as well.
You have, yeah.
That must be really special for you.
That's actually really good. I'm going to see him after this, hopefully.
Mate,
So
he's such a boss man, isn't he?
I mean, when I saw him, the only time I've seen him so far is a week old.
Yeah.
And now he's going to be quite different, I
Yeah,
imagine.
he's like walking and talking, and he wrote me a song.
Really, already?
Yeah.
Wow, you've got him going.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, I was be like, just be like Uncle Tom, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for making the journey,
Mate, of
coming on to chat. I find your life to be something of a mystery, and I find you to be something of an enigma sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm slowly learning about you, and you're slowly learning about me.
Yeah.
We kind of, through marriage, we kind of got thrust together into a family. That's the peculiar thing about brother and sisters-in-laws, I guess, is that you kind of, especially because we live nowhere near each other.
3 hours away.
So what I understand about you is that you are an incredibly talented musician.
Oh, thanks, man.
You are primarily motivated by your faith.
Mm-hmm.
And that you're deeply interested in seeing your local community kind of flourish and grow.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. That's pretty much the things that drive me.
When did that start to be the thing that drove you? What was it like when you were younger? I'm assuming that perhaps the music was the first of all of them things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the faith piece has always been there. Grew up going to church, so that's always been kind of like an undercurrent through it all. But probably wasn't driving things until later. So music was probably the first thing that I really grabbed as my own. My whole family musical. My dad plays guitar, so I remember growing up watching him playing guitar, and then. Yeah, probably secondary school, end of junior school, I started having guitar lessons, and I was like, oh yeah, I think I'm quite good at this. This is what I want to do, so school was all right, and I was like interested in some stuff. I quite enjoyed history at school, but like I was the kid that would hang out in the music room, at any opportunity, and
my music room was a bit of a sweaty place.
Yeah,
was yours?
Mine wasn't too bad. It was more of a safe haven from the outside world, where because I'm just like the specky kid at school, and I went to an all boys school. It's pretty rough, so I'm there in this intimidating environment, and the music room was like my safe haven.
Right.
And the music teacher was amazing at the time, Mr. Roberts. What a guy.
What a lad.
And he loved all the same music my dad loved, so we would over lunch we would just sit there playing Steely Dan and all this stuff, Toto, and all the stuff that I would listen to at home with my dad, and I'd work out with my music teacher. So it was this safe haven from everywhere else, really. And from then on, when you start thinking about GCSEs and A levels and what you're going to do with your life, it wasn't really a question for me that it was music is what I'm going to do. In whatever form. I didn't have the answer of what that would look like.
But you're just going to go for it.
Music's going to be the thing that I do.
It's really interesting that already the book that I'm writing is exploring this whole idea of mental health, the imagination and creativity, and kind of the symbiotic kind of nature of all of them. And it's so often people identify kind of their creativity as a safe space.
Yeah.
And obviously that was for you. Was it? Do you think that it was to do with the music or the people, or what about a music department makes it a safe space? Because although it was very sweaty at my school, I remember the music department becoming this safe haven, to use them words, for people that otherwise maybe would have been walking around the playground on their own.
Yeah.
Instead, they were in the music department. Why do you think that is?
I think it's so tied to our sense of identity of who we are, and it's not just music and creative things as well. Like, I'm sure for other people in my school, like getting on the football pitch was their safe place or whatever, you know, like, but whatever those things are that sit at the core of us, or begin to reinforce a sense of who we are in the world, of like, oh yeah, I think I'm good at this, and you begin to internalize that thing, and it becomes such a deep part of who you are that even though nobody else understands that thing, or like, you know, it's not everybody's thing, not the majority of people's thing in the school that I was at, for you it becomes this sense of self and security. And like I say, for some people that would have been history or like PE or whatever. Other people develop their own passions and find their safe spaces. But for me, it quickly became not just something I do, but like this is starting to feel like who I am in the world. And the music room was the environment that was safe enough to foster that sense of self in the world.
So straight away you jumped from school kind of with a sense of music is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
A lot of the people I've spoken to who operate in the creative space have actually had a bit more of they started out in what would be considered more of a mainstream kind of job.
Right.
9 to 5.
Yeah.
And then at some point gone, this is killing me.
Yeah.
I'm going to go do something quote unquote creative.
Yeah.
That's more liberating, more freelance.
Yeah.
Whereas you just go, F it.
Yeah.
I'm going to do music.
Just going to dive in.
I mean, how did your parents feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, my parents were actually really supportive. So, yeah, after school, did A-levels, studied music at A-level. And then the question was, would I go to uni? And what would I study? The what would I study was always going to be music, so it was should I go to uni, basically. But during my A-levels, I'd started gigging. I'd met some musicians at college in the city, started gigging around. A singer that I was playing for actually got signed that summer in my second year. And we started playing Glastonbury, other festivals. So what felt like my career had like started already. So to move away from Southampton, away from all those connections for university, just felt like completely the wrong thing to do, because what I wanted to do, I was already doing, and the career had started in that sense. So, and my parents could really see that. They were like all for it, really supportive. I was living with them the whole time, like the next 10 years or so of my life. I'm still just living at home with my parents, you know. And so it was what I did with my life, and it was my career, but I wasn't earning very much at all. Like I was scraping by.
I mean, I guess that's the story of like 99% of musicians.
Totally.
What was the cost to your mental health, maybe? Because whilst we talk about music and being a musician, in some ways there's this really creative, explorative, wow, that's quite glamorous. In another way, we associate musicians, artists with a sense of when the music's done, when you're not on the stage, you're just in turmoil.
Totally.
Was that your experience?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say as strong as turmoil, but definitely the ups and the downs of it. I think an underlying current through all of it would be I always felt like I had to justify myself and that I'd made a valid career choice. Because I wasn't earning loads, or there were lots of other things that I could have done. I could have gotten a job somewhere else, doing something else, earning a bit more, and maybe people in my life maybe thought that I should be doing that. But I always had this sense of like I need to prove to people that what I'm doing is a valid career choice, and because it sits at the core of who I feel I am in the world, like I was saying, I'm not just justifying my career choice. Then I'm justifying who I am. You know, so I had that all the way through. I worked as a freelance musician for over 10 years, and the entire way through, I would always feel like I had to justify myself.
What was the metric for that judging for you? Was it just if I can play at bigger stages and get more money, or was it something else?
I think the more success that I had and the bigger stages I played on definitely helped. But I was never earning enough to really live independently. I moved to London for a little bit one summer, came straight back to Southampton. I lived away from home for a little bit, but I was never earning enough where I felt like I'm setting myself up for life here. I was always kind of just feeling like I'm scraping by, and I couldn't quite see what the progression was for me to get to that point.
Yeah.
And so I've got this like tension of, I really believe that this is valid, what I'm doing, and yet the metric of income and like, a stable life doesn't seem to be there. That's not to say that it's not possible. I have loads of mates who are freelance musicians. They earn really well, like they have stable lives in that career, and I passionately believe that it is a valid career choice. So I wouldn't want to communicate that everybody should pack it in and do a proper job
for sure,
whatever, because that's what everybody was telling me that I felt so strongly wasn't the case. But that just isn't how it worked out for me. It never really felt stable enough at the level that I was working at.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to pick up on, is in our endeavors to kind of meet our imaginations with reality, which is often quite an explosive kind of thing. And as you rightly point out, so many people observing that onwards will go, oh, that's a really lovely idea or a really lovely dream.
Yeah.
But
I used to hate that sentence that people would say, like, people would ask me of like, okay, so how long are you going to do this for? Or like, or like, okay, so when are you going to get a proper job? Yeah, it's basically, they wouldn't put it in those terms, but that's essentially the question.
What changed for you? Because now you're not working in that. What was the motivation to jump out of that life?
It was probably less of a hard stop than that. So, like I said, over 10 years, worked as a freelance musician, gigging around, touring around. But the whole time, to bring the faith piece into it again, where we started, I developed a passion for the local church, and my faith became my own, not just something that my parents would bring me along to when I was a teenager, really. And faith became as much a part of that core identity, sense of self in the world as music for me, if not more, even more foundational, more at the heart of who I am. And so that was the case all the way through my freelance career. I was a person of faith, passionate about the local church. I'd be leading worship at my church in the music teams, expressing my creativity in a church context as well as in my job as a freelancer. And I had this constant like pendulum swing in my life between basically trying to answer the question, what should I do with my life? Should I be a Christian who is a musician who works in the music world, if you want to call it that? Or should I be a Christian who is involved in ministry full-time and creative ministry and music in the church? And I had this constant swing back and forth. I would literally swing back and forth between, like, I did an internship alongside my music work at my church. At the end of that, I went to Bible college, and I only lasted a year of 3 in Bible college, because I remember, obviously term started in September, and then the February of that first year, I went to watch Foals at Wembley Arena with a few mates. I remember sitting in the seats at Wembley Arena watching Foals, literally saying to myself in my mind, why am I not doing that? Like,
that just looks better.
That is like, I'm going to these lectures, learning about theology, and it felt it just wasn't the right environment for me. And then I went to see Foals and I was like, why am I not doing that? So then dropped out of Bible college, went back into full-time work as a musician, gigged for ages, still leading worship at church, but fully like threw myself back into the freelance world. And that was the next 10 years, basically, of leading worship at church, still really passionate about that, still feeling this sense of core identity and faith, but expressing my music in the freelance world.
So this seems like a bit of a tension that I've been a person of faith as well, and some of the other people that I've spoken to have been people of faith. Do you see it as sometimes your creativity is being motivated by a sense of identity, and then sometimes it's motivated by a sense of who you have faith in or what you have faith in? Do you see them as a split? Because in order, it seems to me, to pursue creativity over such a long period of time, there's got to be something that is more motivating than stable lifestyle, because they always seem to me to be somewhat, unless you're very fortunate in contradiction with each other, it's incredibly hard to live a very liberated, creative, responding to your imagination all the time lifestyle without there being some cost. So your driving force has to outweigh the cost. For people of faith, that motivation is obviously their faith. For maybe certain things, but maybe other things it's more of an internal identity thing. Did you ever see being a musician, playing at Glastonbury, being motivated by something different from being a musician in church context, or do you kind of reconcile them as the same thing?
I think at their root they feel like the same thing to me, because they both sit at the core of who I feel I am, and I'm expressing my identity in the world through both of those things, whether I'm in leading worship at church or playing at Glastonbury. But they sit in very different spaces. So I think they both, I remember standing up in church once and talking about this to the congregation of like, for me, both of those experiences are worship. So leading worship obviously is the more clear one.
Yeah.
But playing at Glastonbury for me honestly was worship, and I would sit because I'm acknowledging that God has put this creativity within me and he's given me these gifts. And so then I wouldn't always manage it, but I would try before I get on any stage, just say a little prayer, thank God that he's given me these gifts and he's made me to be who I am. And then from that point onward, every single note that I would play is worship, because I'm acknowledging where that root source has come from. And, you know, the however many thousand people in the crowd have no idea. The rest of the band have no idea. But I'm there worshipping away because I'm acknowledging where the gift has come from that he's given me, you know? So in my mind, they weren't separate things. They were separate worlds, but I was still there.
You were still, and that kind of coreness of you involved intrinsically.
Yeah,
but
exactly. Yeah.
Or the same thing, because I guess that's the reality of faith, is that it is a bit of particularly of the Christian faith, it's this mixture of what God put in you and then it just being you anyway. Yeah. There's kind of a, you are created, you're being sent with a mission. Yeah. There's someone that's kind of guiding you through life, but you're also making creative choices, and that's a bit of a paradox in a sense. So I've been reading a book on and off for 4 years, maybe even longer, and I've never read it all the way through in one chunk because it's too scary. Right. Tolkien wrote a book called On Fairy Stories. Okay. And in it, he talks about the idea of imagination. He calls it sub-creation, where it's essentially the ability to create without bounds inside of ourselves in order that we may birth beautiful and brilliant things into the world. Obviously, recognizing that we can also come up with ideas that are not particularly fruitful, like terrorism, for example. All exploits of the imagination. There was also a sense in which, for me, and I can't quite remember if he used these exact words, but I got the sense between the lines that sub-creation or our imaginations is where in some ways we became a a lot like God in the sense that we were created in a God's image.
Yeah.
Do you reconcile with that? Do you see your imagination and creativity being a reflection of being created in God's image?
Yeah, definitely. Without wanting to make this into a theology podcast, 100%. I think, and that's all of humanity. So, and we sometimes limit creativity down to like the arts, right? But all of humanity is made in God's image, and He is the creator, and so there's an imprint on every single human that is creative. Some of us express that in the arts, others of us problem solve, and that's a creative act. Or the very fact that we have imagination in the first place and we can think up ideas out of nothing, I would say is a complete reflection of the God who did exactly the same thing on page 1 of the Bible, like thought up everything out of nothing.
Yeah.
And so we do the same. But I think as well, as I was thinking about this conversation, for me, there's a little nuance to it though, which is that for me, and this is maybe where it ties into the mental health piece as well, is creativity. The way I see creativity and the imagination is about tuning into reality. So I think sometimes we think about creativity and the imagination as freeing our minds, and like if we can just tune into the ether, or like, you know, the muse, or whatever is out there, that like in, you know, or like in the 60s everybody was on acid because they were looking for this inspiration from somewhere else, right? Whereas I think creativity and the best people, but definitely the best creatives, are the people who are most in tune with the world around them, the most present to the world around them, which then ties into the mental health piece, because in my experience, so much of anxiety is triggered or made worse by a sense of irrational thought that isn't true, that isn't real, right?
Yeah.
You start to believe these thoughts in your own head and become so overwhelmed by a particular thought or whatever that it overwhelms your body and your mind. And so that's where you get all things like mindfulness, and, you know, if you feel like you're about to have a panic attack, like touch something and like ground yourself in the world. And so I think creativity and art has an amazing power to speak into mental health and that whole thing, because it's the solution. Like if anxiety is about a sense of feeling detached from the world and believing untruth, and creativity is all about being grounded in the world and telling the story of what is real, and like in a relatable way. You know, like if you hear a song that's like, oh, that lyric just speaks to me, like I completely relate to that, right? That's like the best kind of art. The worst kind of art, in my opinion, is when you just think like, what are they on about? Like I can't relate to that at all. Like, did you see this is like a bit of a tangent, but this week there's that clip of Gordon Ramsay that went viral. Did you see that?
I'm not sure what one you said.
Oh man, he's the next episode of Jake Humphrey's High Performance podcast is with Gordon Ramsay, and there's this little clip that's like a teaser of the episode which has gone viral, where he's talking about how he like learned the power of success or whatever, and he's like, my father-in-law took me aside at one point and just said to me, you know, sell your Porsche. You need to just sell your Porsche. And I was like, is there a less relatable story
how
for a
inspiring
podcast? Like,
for all of us.
Oh yeah, thanks so much. I'll go out and sell my Porsche. But anyway, the point I'm making there is that the best art is relatable because it reflects reality, right? You're telling the story of what is real in the world, and that has immense power to speak into this area of mental health. Because so much of anxiety is about a sense of believing untruth and irrational thought. So
what do you think about the term? Another term I've been playing around with a little bit is mismanaged creativity. in one way we might view that as every time we create something externally that is not, for the benefit of the world flourishing around us. Another interpretation of that could be that our imaginations almost run wild, get away from us, where we depart from reality too far, like what you've said.
Yeah.
How does that mismanaged creativity conjure up images in your head? Is that something that you would say that you've ever been subject to?
Almost definitely. I mean, I've probably had tons of terrible ideas that I've pursued that I shouldn't have done. Whether that's creatively or just in life, like ideas, patterns of behavior, like, all kinds of things that I think up that I shouldn't be doing or whatever. I think that's a universal human experience. But I think, I think it's definitely a thing. This idea that sometimes we like to think of imagination as this like chains off, like here we go, just like big sky thinking. But I don't actually think that's. I actually think that can contribute to anxiety.
Yeah.
Because you've got endless possibilities, right? Like I loved your thing in one of the other episodes about the sushi thing, of just like so many options and just like, oh my goodness, I'm paralyzed by my own imagination.
By so much,
like, there's too many things. And so, limitless imagination, I don't think is actually that helpful. But again, to come back to reality, when we're grounded in what is real and true and achievable and both about the world around us and ourselves, then we can say, oh, I've noticed this problem in the world.
Yeah.
And I've imagined an achievable solution.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go and do it. And then you've contributed something meaningful to the world. It might be like, so my friend has just released a single that's all about the loss of her dad when she was really young. And that is equally something that is real. It's not something nice.
Yeah.
But it's something real that she's put out into the world because she's grounded in the reality of pain in the world. Her own story, she knows how she feels about it and who she is on the other side of it, and she's imagined how to tell that story in a meaningful way and put it out into the world so that other people can relate to that because it's real. And so that's how I think about it, of like, rather than endless imagination and just all these ideas and let's do all of them, which we'll never be able to do and we'll feel overwhelmed by the possibility of all of it. Be present to the world around us and let the world around us and our sense of self inspire us into imagination, which is what the word inspire or inspiration actually is, right? It's like, apparently it's from some Latin word which literally means to breathe into, which means that rather than having to conjure up a sense of imagination and like escape from the world to imagine, the world around us is constantly informing and breathing inspiration into us. We just need to be present and aware enough to know it. And that's a big problem. In today's world, we're often completely the opposite. We're not present. We're so distracted, whether it's by our own a million ideas or our phones or, like there's, or Netflix, or there's just constant like stuff that we're distracted by, so that we're never present to reality, And
I think that's one of the key. I agree with you. I think our culture sits in this kind of prevalence of limitlessness, particularly internally. It's obvious, I think, to so many people now that we live in something of a mental health crisis. And in a sense, that's being just propped up by this idea that be whatever you want, do whatever you want, everything is possible. And that gives our brain nothing to anchor down to.
Totally.
You become a ship that's just bobbing around at the whim of the ocean.
100%.
And at that point, you have no control. And you talk about boundaries. Where have you identified the boundaries for your imagination? Because in some ways, it it makes us feel uncomfortable, I think, because it goes against, if you think about the Peter Pan idea of imagination, that kind of, you're floating on clouds and you're flying and you're being a young boy forever and fighting pirates. That is a boundless imagination where you fly off to Neverland and all things are possible. Or sounds even great. Something like Narnia. Yeah. These great fairy tales and stories of all of our childhoods. Mm-hmm. There is an appealingness to a limitless imagination. Yeah. But when it touches us in our everyday walks, like you said, it ends frequently with paralysis rather than, it's not freedom, it's paralysis because of the endless opportunities. So how do you create boundaries for your imagination?
I think it's about two things. One, am I actually able to do it? Like the idea that I've had, or is it just some pipe dream? And pipe dreams are okay. Like, it's good to have aspirations and projects that you park and you're like, one day maybe. Like, that's okay. But if it's something I'm thinking about for now, is it actually achievable? Do I have the resources? Do I have the time? Is that actually something that I should pursue? Because it might not be achievable. And then the second thing, is it beneficial in the world to other people to put that out there? I don't just want to put out fluff into the world that's not gonna be relatable to people because it's like not reflecting reality, or just like whatever it might be that makes it a bad idea, in the sense that it's not helping anyone. Like that, again, that's partly the faith piece in me that drives that motivation. But like I want to create stuff. I want to give my imagination and because like we're saying, your imagination is a limited resource, and maybe it's helpful to think about it in terms of like budgeting your imagination. Like we don't think of money as this endless resource that we can just throw into anything. Yeah. Some people do, and it goes very wrong. Yeah. But it's the same with our imagination and our capacity to think and come up with new ideas. We need to make sure that we're putting that in the right places, into the things that we really can actually achieve, and the things that will help people around us in the world. Because I think we exist for the sake of others. So the stuff I want to make and budget my imagination for should be for the sake of others.
And that's one of the most beautiful things I think I've seen come out of your working life over the last couple of years has been a transition. Not that being a musician is self-serving. No. In no way am I identifying that. However, there has been a shift into how do I create room for other people to effectively imagine, communicate, have relationship in more deep and meaningful ways. How you, either in the church and in your work, or in your relationship and your marriage, how are you creating safe spaces for other people where they can explore their imaginations and their creativity?
I think it comes down to, again, like it's the same thing expressed in a different way. So as a musician and a songwriter, I want to tune into what is real in the world and tell that story so that other people can know what is real in the world. And so that's the same in my marriage. That's what I have to do all the time with Meg, is like, oh no, remember that's not true. Like, that thought isn't true. This is what's real in the world, and speaking to that in that way. It's the same with my team that I lead at church. So now I work for a church. I'm the worship and creative pastor at church. So I'm essentially pastoring and caring for people who are doing what I do. So telling the story of what is real in the world through creativity. And so I'm always reminding them of what is true about them. What are their giftings? What are they really good at? What are they not good at? Like, we shouldn't shy away from that. That's about what is real in the world. What can you work on? Like, all those kinds of things. I'm reminding people what is real in the world, and that then equips them to do the same thing with other people, if that makes sense. And however they express that, whether that's in writing a song, leading worship, whatever it is in our teams, I want to remind people of what is real in the world so that they can then tell that story to others from that same place of understanding and being present to what is real rather than distracted and detached from everything.
This is a very off-the-cuff question.
Yeah.
It's going to come at you from nowhere.
Sure.
One of the ways that Jordan Peterson suggests that we can measure creativity is through our ability to have divergent thinking patterns. And something I'm going to do with you now is going to help us assess your divergent thinking.
Great.
Can you name 5 uses for a brick?
Build a house, smash a window. You can make a little fire, like plinth, to put a fire on top of. What could you do? I'm imagining like grinding up a brick into something, but I don't know what you would do with the brick dust. I don't know, man. Bricks. What do you do with bricks? Just you build stuff with bricks, don't you? I don't know. That's where my head goes first, and then smash. Well, I don't know why I said smashing a window second. I don't know what that says about me.
Yeah, just come straight in. It's like you build stuff, then you break stuff.
You build stuff, then you break stuff. Yeah. I don't know. I
think we're waiting for one more. Here.
One more.
One more.
What else could you do with a brick? You could like strap it to your feet to make yourself a little bit taller.
For those in need, what a suggestion.
For the sake of others, guys.
For the sake of others.
I say,
It's a theme of your life.
Yeah.
You're creatively walking alongside and shepherding communities.
I really don't. I don't want to paint myself as some saint who's always thinking about the sake of others. Like it's a work in progress.
No, I don't think it's necessarily about your ability or your actual doing of it. It's more that your intention of doing it. You're someone who's intentioned to create them spaces for other people. The reason for the brick question and the way that it is used to measure our creativity is how far away our answers are from traditional thoughts. Right. So building things.
I went very traditional at the start.
Is straight back in there with and then we did get a bit further out there with helping people that feel that they need a bit of a boost to the height.
There you go.
Of part of their life.
Yeah.
So I feel as though there's some divergent
there you go.
Creative
over
thinking
time,
patterns there.
But what I needed was someone else to bring the divergent thought out of me, Matt. Like you,
teasing it out, massaging it out, if you will.
Or you could say, I needed to be present to the people and the reality around me to bring out the creative thought.
This is very true.
So there you go.
I mean, we've learnt a whole heap here. I would just like to say thank you very much because you've brought up some thoughts here which have really inspired me. And
anytime.
Spoken about some things which I haven't necessarily thought about. And I think that's the beauty. And I kind of had a feeling that you would come at a perspective that was going to be fresh and interesting and different from mine. And anytime, really appreciate your mind. I appreciate what you're doing. I think that you're doing a great job for the people in your community.
Thanks, man.
And really appreciate you spending some time.
Mate, anytime. All of that likewise back. I think these conversations are great. Really important. Value the way that you think because it's different to me and there's value in that.
Thanks, man. Where can people find you? There is a tiny little old prehistoric podcast out there of Tom and Meg's. Is that discontinued now?
That's from a past life. It probably still is on Spotify somewhere. But anyway, if you want to find what I'm doing right now, you can look up St. Mary's Church, Southampton, SAINT, not ST. St. Mary's Church, Southampton. There's like teaching and stuff that I do there, but also our kind of creative arm is called Saints Music. So Spotify, we've got singles out and stuff. You can check that out.
Perfect. Check it out. Some of these music is great. Some of it I haven't listened to, so I can't say.
There you go.
Thank you so much, man.
Yes, mate.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Imagining. I hope that you've had the opportunity to discover something new about yourself. If you wouldn't mind and you enjoyed listening, then I would be really appreciative if you subscribed on whatever channel you're listening on.